a little bit about myself while we pull this up. Sam Cat, Wisconsin DNR. Been there for, let's see, over 6 years now. I've always been in the stormwater program and specifically in the municipal separate storm sewer system permit, the MS4 permit. So when I started, I was lead compliance and enforcement. So I was looking at what the permit says, going to talk to permittees. Are you guys doing this? And now one of my main roles is actually drafting these individual permits. State of Wisconsin at the moment has 243 MS4 permittees in the state of Wisconsin. The southeast region, which is what I cover. So if you drew a line from Sheboygan down to Walworth County, back to the lake, it's those 8 counties. There's 103 permittees. So we've got, and it makes sense, right? That's where all the people live, is down here. So yeah, any questions about who I am? DNR, MS4, cool. Yeah, so, so here's my contact information. It'll be there again at the end. So today I'm going to be talking really like high level, but again, you have questions, want to get into nitty gritty stuff, I'll be here. But yeah, I'd like to start from the top. So like the MS4 permit, that's what I do. The goal is to protect, local waters, surface waters, groundwater, wetlands, so waters of the state. How do you do that? Municipalities are taking actions to better the quality of their community's stormwater discharge via actions like education, right? If you can prevent a behavior from, causing a stormwater pollutant, that's good. Actions like street sweeping, right? We've got cars everywhere. Cars are, one of the biggest issues with stormwater pollutant in these urban areas. But it's also building and maintaining these structural controls like green infrastructure, and that's what we're here about today. So post-construction BMPs, those ones that have technical standards, right? These are designed to capture and treat stormwater pollutants. And they're designed to treat, a certain quantity of like pollutants, right? So your BMPs are going to be getting loaded in with pollutants. They are going to be used. So they need to have maintenance done so that they continue to function as designed, so that they continue to protect water quality. If they're not maintained, they're not protecting water quality as intended. Okay, so BMP inspection and maintenance expectations. So from the MS4 permit perspective, right? BMP should be inspected and maintained according to their stormwater management plan. However, the MS4 permit requires BMPs be inspected at least once every 5 years. So it's kind of like a backstop, right? If you had a stormwater management plan that said we only inspect once every 10 years, the permit comes in and says we want it done at least every 5 years. But if your stormwater management plan says we inspect every single year, that's the expectation. Follow your plan, but at least once every 5 years. So what BMPs are expected to be required to be inspected? Who can do the inspections? Am I required to recertify BMPs? Because that's a theme that we're talking about today. And then I wanted to share a little bit of updated language in MS4 permits. So what BMPs are required to be inspected? So all municipally owned and operated BMPs. Municipally owned BMPs are owned by the municipality, right? It's a city-owned pond. Municipally operated BMPs means it's not owned by the municipality, but that municipality has an obligation to ensure that BMP is being maintained. So a lot of times I would say typically it's that private BMP that has a long-term maintenance agreement with the municipality. They may not be the ones that the municipality may not be the entity that's doing the inspections and maintenance, but they can if they need to, right? That legal agreement is there. So there's this obligation to ensure this BMP is being inspected and maintained. Shared BMPs could also fall into this category. So if there's a neighboring MS4 that owns the BMP, but your MS4 is discharging stormwater into it, if that's allowed, that's kosher. Typically we see some kind of long-term maintenance agreement between these shared BMPs. So who can do the inspections? So WDNR does not have inspector requirements. Some municipalities do. So some municipalities require like a licensed PE to inspect these post-construction BMPs. That's their own requirement. It's not a DNR requirement. So then I have this question here. If the MS4 permit requires the permittee to inspect all BMPs, right? All municipally owned and operated BMPs once every 5 years, does this mean that somebody from the municipality has to do the inspections? No, but the MS4 needs to make sure that BMP was being inspected and maintained, right? So like using Carrie's firm to go out and do inspections, right? Like that's a consultant, private BMP owner. If it's a licensed PE that has to do it, again, that's their own municipal requirement, not DNR requirement. But if the municipality can ensure that the BMP was inspected at least once every 5 years, that inspection counts. Am I required to recertify BMPs? So DNR's expectation is that BMPs are being inspected and maintained. We don't require a formal BMP recertification process. Just like the previous slide, some municipalities do. So some municipalities require like all their BMPs be recertified again by this licensed PE every few years. And also like the last slide, that's their requirement. It's not a DNR requirement. So our expectation is that BMPs are being inspected, they're being maintained so they continue to function as designed. But we don't have a formal recertification requirement. So updated language in MS4 permits. The MS4 permit requires these written program procedures that describe in detail how the permittee intends to comply with the permit conditions, right? So a lot of these permits, there's a handful that are still not have this clear requirement, but we're getting there. But mainly, I shouldn't say mainly, most all of our MS4s already have these written program procedures due to the department. And when we looked through them, we found that big chunks of the post-construction program were gone, the BMP inspection and maintenance. So I have this like, rather than explain your entire program, reissued permits are going to have more clear language. So not like new requirements, we're just looking for stuff that was missing in the past. So here's some of the updated language. I know it's a lot to put on a slide, but BMP inspection maintenance procedure, you know, in a written program procedure, in a written document, like tell us how, you know, you're doing your BMP inspection and maintenance. And we have it separated between the municipally owned, so that's like the city-owned BMP, municipally operated, that'd be like a private BMP with long-term maintenance. These are separated in the permit because typically these are different, right? Municipalities typically inspect and maintain their own BMPs. Municipally operated BMPs are typically inspected and maintained by that private BMP owner. So we're just kind of peeling apart what these program requirements are and laying it out a little bit more clear in the permits. So for these municipally operated BMPs, you know, describe who is responsible for inspecting and maintaining. Again, is that the private BMP owner? Some municipalities, even though they've got private BMPs with long-term maintenance agreements, they have decided that they will be doing all the inspections and maintenance. So we're just looking for how does this all happen? Who's responsible for doing what? And then the permittee's procedure to verify that these municipally operated BMPs were inspected and maintained, right? So is a municipality like requesting inspection reports, right? So we're just looking for the, you know, at the end of the day, how do we ensure that these BMPs are being inspected and maintained? This is something that will be in newer reissued MS4 permits. Again, not a new requirement where this is just something that was missing in a lot of these written program procedures. And that is when there's this municipally operated BMP, there's some non-compliance around it. What does the municipality do to get that BMP to return to compliance, right? So I have some potential non-compliance over here. Sorry, I can see it on my screen. So like the required inspection reports are not being submitted. What does your municipality do next, right? Or if this BMP needs maintenance, but the owner is not providing reasonable assurance that maintenance is going to occur, what do you do next? You know, do you send a letter? How long before they respond until you take the next step? So again, like this big picture, the BMPs need to be maintained so they can function as designed to protect water quality. So describe all the steps that you could take to make sure that that BMP is getting that required maintenance. And that's it. Carrie, questions? Yeah. Okay.
And Sam, when you get a question, the folks online can't hear us.
Okay.
So repeat the question.
Any questions? Maybe some cooking for later?
I do have
Yeah.
one question just about the last topic that you're talking about potential enforcement actions. I was wondering if there are kind of any initial thoughts about what those might be or what DNR would recommend for municipalities to do.
Yeah, so the question was, when it comes to after the permittee finds there's non-compliance with a private BMP or this municipally operated BMP, what are some ideas about like enforcement, right? So being at DNR, we have a stepped enforcement process. So we always try, to start with the not enforcement steps, right? We're just giving you a phone call, we're sending you an email, and then we go up from there. We'll send you like a notice of non-compliance letter. If we're not getting responses from there, we go to notice of violation. We're not getting responses from there. We've got citation authority. We could refer to DOJ. So that's like the step. Doesn't mean we have to start, at the bottom. If something's really egregious, we could just, go up the middle. So I think that's pretty common in municipalities, like to have some kind of stepped enforcement. Nobody wants to do enforcement. Well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of folks don't want to do enforcement right away. But yeah, some of my municipalities, like their first step is a notice of violation. So yeah, it's not up to DNR to decide what all of your steps are. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that BMP is maintained. So my guess is that the very last step, you've tried all of your options, which, I'm looking at as like letters, citations, but municipalities might have more tools in their toolbox, right? But at the end of the day, this maintenance agreement gives that municipality the authority to do the maintenance. So if the last step is the MS4 is doing the maintenance, we're describing if the municipality is just eating that cost, or if they're going to get that cost back, on taxes. If they're going to be sending like a bill, municipalities have different, like I said, tools in their toolbox to get those enforcements. But that's kind of what this big picture thing at the bottom here is saying. Like, if we're not getting compliance and you've tried everything, you need to maintain the BMP. So, good question. Thank you. Yeah.
So I had a situation where we did this in the city of Milwaukee. We did a certification inspection for a private system. It was a small church, their underground system. It had obviously never been maintained. It was in pretty bad shape. And so we couldn't recertify it. We let the owner know, let the city know. To properly clean and maintain the system, to basically rehab it, would have been tens of thousands of dollars. This church just doesn't even have the money. We didn't even get paid for our inspection. So ultimately, how does that get resolved? A situation like that? Would the city of Milwaukee be responsible for them doing the maintenance themselves? And
yeah, so I would say, okay, so the question was, there's a private BMP that is past the point of saving, right? They're like maintaining.
Extensive.
It would take extensive rehab to maintain it, right? So this BMP did not get recertified. The consultant told the local municipality that this BMP couldn't get recertified. It needs a lot of work, and that private BMP owner doesn't have the money to do the work, right? So the question was, is the city responsible for maintaining that BMP? The answer would be within that legal document that the city has, right? So a long-term maintenance agreement with that private BMP owner. I would have to take a look at it, right? The maintenance agreement should allow the city to have the authority to do the maintenance. But I don't know without looking at like that maintenance agreement. But the expectation is, yeah, the city ultimately should be making sure that that BMP is getting maintained. And that falls into the like anti-backsliding requirement as well. Like if we are putting stuff in the ground to protect water quality, that's where we're at. So we can't just remove it, right? So if that BMP is not going to be fixed, it should be replaced.
I guess that gets to the Terry's point about doing ongoing maintenance rather than.
Right. Yep. And I'd say that was So this backstop requirement of BMP should be inspected at least once every 5 years. That happened before I started at DNR. But I could only guess that it's because these BMPs, we stuck them in the ground and just forgot about them, right? So there's this requirement that you got to go out at least once every 5 years and look at your BMPs so that hopefully we can avoid situations like that. Any more questions right now?
So it's late.
My name's Leif Hauke. I'm a Waukesha County stormwater engineer. I've been doing it for 24 years now. My background is I have a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from Michigan Tech in Houghton, Michigan, which is also my hometown. And to advance, which button do I hit? Just the arrow key? Okay. So I was asked to talk about Waukesha County's stormwater maintenance program. And I don't know if when I was invited, they realized that it's sort of a complicated topic because I work for Waukesha County. Well, county governments were created as sort of an intermediate layer between state government and local governments back when the state became a state 180 years ago or whenever it was. And at that time, it took probably 4 days to get from Superior to Madison on horseback. So the state said, we don't telegraph, I think had just been invented, maybe communications were a problem. We're going to create these semi-autonomous government bodies to help out the local communities as they develop. They became towns and then villages and cities. And, we'll provide them some assistance in the form of a subsidy. And they'll provide government services that, the state, that they can't provide for themselves, like law enforcement, mental health, things like that. And one of the services that the county provides for the citizens of Waukesha County is in the more rural communities, which tends to be the west half of the county. We'll offer to run stormwater. We'll offer to implement stormwater ordinances from them because that was becoming a requirement from the state 20-some years ago. You had to adopt stormwater ordinances. Well, to retain a stormwater engineer, and as a consultant or even somebody in-house costs thousands, tens of thousands of dollars a year. A lot of communities couldn't afford that. So the county signed intergovernmental agreements with a dozen or so, 15 of the local communities. And as they've been gradually incorporating over the years, a couple of them went their own way and hired their own engineers to do the ordinance implementation. But some of the others have become villages and retained our services. So we serve about, I forget the number, it's about 10 communities altogether, and mostly in the western half of the state. So the county's jurisdiction is these communities where we've signed intergovernmental agreements. It also covers the county property itself. So we have our office campus in the middle of Waukesha. We have parks, we have our highway system, and then the county also owns just some undeveloped land that's been acquired over the years. So what I'm going to talk about is basically our jurisdiction, our role in private development, maintenance agreements, which, as Sam was explaining a minute ago, are critical to having a stormwater program. If you don't have maintenance agreements, all those BMPs, for all intents and purposes, don't exist anymore. And then a little bit about what the county does in-house as far as our inspection and maintenance program, again, to fulfill the requirements that Sam was just talking about. So our jurisdiction is mostly in the towns in the western part of the county, some villages that have kept us on through intergovernmental agreements, county land and highways. And what the county does is when somebody comes in to do a development, we require them to get a permit. They have to submit plans. We review the plans. And a big part of the plan submittal is we require them to submit maintenance agreements and record them up front, even before development starts. So we regulate sites through the construction process. And, but then at that point, we get a maintenance agreement recorded. But then at that point, we step out of the process. We turn the ongoing enforcement authority over to the local community. And the reason for that is by statute, counties cannot special charge. And special charging is ultimately the fallback that communities have to implement, to enforce maintenance requirements. If somebody defaults or refuses to do maintenance, the local community is authorized by the maintenance agreement to step in, do an inspection, do repair work, and then recoup those costs from via special charges. County can't do that, so we have no way to to do long-term enforcement of maintenance agreements unless we just want to do it out of our own pockets. So because we are not the long-term enforcing authority, we do not do post-construction inspections on privately owned BMPs. We do a final inspection to verify, yes, it's built the way it was supposed to be according to the plans. But we do inspections of our own BMPs. So the maintenance agreements that Sam was talking about, I was going to go into that just a little bit to this template here that you're seeing is something that my department drew up in the early 2000s. And I think I'm not sure where my supervisor got the original template from, but I think a lot of it is original. I think it's been widely plagiarized by communities, so you've probably seen it in other locations as well. And, I don't have enough time to go into all the details of it, but I just thought I'd point out a couple things that were, I think, unique to what we drew up back in the day and might merit a little bit of explanation. So we found that with maintenance agreements, recording them after the fact is a nightmare. So for properties that are just owned by a single proprietor, we say, we're not going to issue a permit until you record the maintenance agreement. For land divisions, we require them to get an approved draft before we'll issue a permit, because often with land divisions, they don't get recorded until sometime after a permit has been issued and construction is started. So, but we tell them, as soon as you walk into the register of deeds to record your land division, you have to record this at the same time. One thing we found is that it does not work for individual, in the case of land divisions, for individuals to own the BMPs within as a regional BMP. They have to be jointly owned, otherwise you wind up with an enforcement nightmare where some one lot owner is trying to do the maintenance for a basin that was built to serve 30 lots. It's a big basin. It's time to dredge it. The bill's going to be $80,000. They go around with their hat in their hand to try and collect from their neighbors. Well, you can imagine how that goes. So in our ordinance and also in the maintenance agreement, no joint ownership of regional, no individual ownership of regional BMPs. They also can't be owned by homeowners associations because homeowners associations can dissolve. And then we wind up with a tax default and it becomes the county's property. So we want them to be on outlots. The outlots have to be jointly owned and it has to be inseparable from the ownership of the lots themselves. Another thing we do with the maintenance agreements, and I'm not sure if other communities do this or not, is we require that they include a synopsis of the design. And part of the reason is back in the day, the plat or the maintenance agreement would say, you have to do this, this, and this, and refer to plans that are on file at Waukesha County. Well, Waukesha County archives its files, and after about 7 years, they go to the incinerator. So that anything that needs to be referenced in the future has to be a recorded document. The way we set it up is the first part of the maintenance agreement gets recorded, like I said, at the time of permit issuance. And that sets up the legal structure of the agreement. Who's responsible for what the enforcement procedures are, et cetera, where the basin is, records any drainage easements or access easements that are necessary. And then construction happens. And following construction, we require the developers to record an addendum. And the addendum is where the plan goes. And the reason why we separated these two is for two reasons. One is stuff changes during construction sometimes. And you have to adapt to conditions. There's a process for that. It's okay as long as they go through that process. But the ultimate construction may be a little different from what was originally designed. We want what's recorded to reflect what's actually out there, not what was supposed to be there but got modified. The other thing is we do it in order to try and implement some accountability on the part of the developer and their engineer, because if we go out at the end of a construction project and find out that what's built is either shoddy or does not match what was on plans, that's a big problem, because fixing things after the fact is very difficult. So what we do is we require the the developer to retain an engineer through the construction process. They have to do a series of spot inspections that are programmed in advance. And then at the end of the process, they have to sign and stamp a form we call construction verification that says, I did these inspections. Here's my signature saying that everything is built the way it was supposed to be. And that goes into this addendum, along with the county's permit termination letter saying, yeah, they did a good job and the developer is off the hook. So this is an example of a construction inspection schedule and the verification that the engineer has to sign. So once we've terminated the permit, the language in the agreement says that enforcement authority is transferred to the local municipality, and they have the authorization to require inspections to be done or do the inspections themselves, and to fix what needs to be fixed if the owner fails to do it. And also if there is a land division involved, the maintenance agreement states that once what the text that you can't read at the bottom is saying that the owner is responsible for maintenance of the BMPs until the permit is terminated, and at that point responsibility is transferred to what are now the lot owners. Just a few maintenance agreements, maintenance requirements that are included in the agreement are they have to provide access to get to the BMP. It has to be at least 15 feet wide, so you could, get a quad axle or whatever back there. It includes any drainage easements, especially if they're not in like a land division document. There's a section of the agreement that allows meets and bounds easements to be defined so that can avoid causing drainage issues and also create the access easement. I mentioned before, BMPs, if they're on outlots, we want them on outlots, and we want shared ownership, all of which has to be stated on the plat or the land division document. Some stuff to avoid. To get to a BMP, we found that creating easements either like through somebody's property or down a lot line is a problem, because people are very possessive about their property, understandably, and they don't really care if there's an easement there. They're going to put trees there, whether the easement bans that or not. And if the municipality has to come in and start cutting down trees so they can get to the basin, it's going to be a really difficult situation. So the best option is to have a flag outlot where essentially you have the basin and an outlot, but then essentially a flagpole that connects that outlot to the road, so that there's no dispute about who owns it, what can be done on that property. Again, avoid regional BMPs on individual lots. Another pet peeve is fountains and aerators that don't have shutoffs during rain event. The picture is showing a fountain that's gushing during the middle of a rain event. The reason that's a problem is because these basins work on the principle of sedimentation, and fountains agitate the water, so sedimentation doesn't occur. Another big maintenance issue I found is wet basins. I think a lot of people think, well, you dig a hole in the ground, you have to like mow it once a year, maybe. They're fairly relatively maintenance free. Every 20 years or so, you come in and dredge it. But other than that, they're fairly low maintenance. Actually, wet basins are really high maintenance because they leak, because they attract muskrats and water loving plants, especially woody plants, they're magnets for them. So it seems like you can see a basin will be in good condition. You turn around, you come back a week later, and there's 4-inch poplar trees growing all over the banks. So they're actually relatively high maintenance, and they also have other issues like they're a drowning risk for especially if there's little kids in the area. And part of the design standard is that they're supposed to have a safety shelf that's submerged just below the permanent pool elevation. Well, permanent pool elevations come and go because you have leakage, because we have droughts. So they're a big challenge. And not to mention algae, mosquitoes. And now we're finding that they export phosphorus from the sediment when they go anoxic. So I don't like wet basins. So the county owns about 70 BMPs altogether. And Sam mentioned earlier that we have a database where we do our tracking and management. This is a screenshot of it. I'll show you a list of the different types of BMPs, but we try to inspect at least half of them each year. I think Sam said the requirement is once every 5 years minimum, but that's 5 years is a pretty long time because, like I said before, woody vegetation can sprout up in it seems like weeks, but at least in a couple of years, a willow or something like that can go from being the size of your thumb to 6 inches in diameter, at which point it's really hard to get rid of. As part of our inspection program, I meet with our highway patrol superintendents and make a circuit of some of the basins that they're responsible for maintaining. I also meet with our highway staff, our airport staff, and look at the basins on our airport, park staff, and look at some of the basins on parks property. We also have at least 100 catch basins, which do get vacuumed out, which is a form of maintenance, but they're not part of our MS4 BMP list. We have about 30 miles of curb and gutter highways. That's not lane miles, that's just miles, which gets swept 2 to 4 times a year. That is part of our MS4 compliance program. So we do that, and then inspection notes get logged in the database that I just showed you a minute ago. And then if there are maintenance needs like tree removal or things like that, I'll write a memo to the staff that are responsible for actually doing the maintenance. My department, the Land Resources Division, doesn't own any backhoes or any mowers or anything like that, so we have to play nice with our other departments. So some of the counties, the BMPs that the county owns include rain gardens, infiltration basins, bioretention basins, permeable pavers, sump catch basins, wet detention basins, grass swales, dry detention, fuel farm containment pads, a green roof like in the picture here from our Health and Human Services building, salt containment pads. And by far the most common maintenance need is suppressing the growth of woody plants. That has to be done almost every year, or else, like I said, they'll go from very small to thick in a matter of no time at all. And then suppressing weeds and invasive plants in general. A lot of our basins are planted with native plants. They require a lot of TLC, and that's always a challenge because the guys that are doing the maintenance are plow truck drivers. Well, they don't know anything about native plants, so and it's also labor intensive. So that's a challenge. We're trying to unfortunately, I think we're trying to get away from using native plants in BMPs just because of the maintenance issue. And there's usually some minor erosion repairs often associated with the basin infalls. And infrequent needs are trying to get rid of muskrats, or at least plugging their holes. dealing with major erosion, sometimes after we get a gully washer. We have dredged a couple of basins. We have done some surface sediment removal from bioretention basins. We haven't had to do any engineered fill removal or replacement yet, but now that's something that will happen eventually. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Hutter. I am the Assistant City Engineer for the City of West Allis. And I began work for the city a little over 20 years ago. So we've done a lot of design and construction within the city. Hard to believe it's been that long, but it has. So I was going to go over just real briefly who we are in West Allis, and then going to go over from a municipal perspective what we do for our best management for our maintenance. Just real quickly, for those who may not know, West Allis is a suburb of Milwaukee. It is our first ring suburb, or a first ring suburb. So it's adjacent to the city of Milwaukee. We are landlocked. We really don't have a lot of room for ponds for large green infrastructure or BMPs. So we need to do what we can in small areas. So it is a lot of trying to get small BMPs to get those stormwater credits where we can get them, and to improve our water quality and lessen our quantity. Again, real quickly, West Allis for a long time relied heavily on industry. Allis-Chalmers obviously was a huge employer for the city for many, many decades. It also, because of all the manufacturing, we do have a lot of pollution. We have a lot of things underground that we don't talk about. And we are trying to change. And if you haven't been to West Allis recently, we do have a very successful farmers market. We are trying to change from that industry to restaurants, living areas, trying to attract young professionals. So I have a few pictures up there, the farmers market, some restaurants. So in doing some of that change from the heavy industry, we're trying to make West Allis a little more green infrastructure friendly, stormwater friendly. So my son and I were recently on a college visit. And because I have teenage drivers, my cars are old. Anyone that pays insurance understands why. We rented a car to go on a college visit. It was a new car. It was spectacular. Anyone like new cars? So it was so nice. And so we all like our new things. My son may go into accounting, and he told me that new cars are terrible investments. They just depreciate. And he's right, absolutely right. And then I got to tell my joke of, hey, you know, the only thing cheaper than an accountant is two accountants. So I don't think he got it quite yet. You can interchange engineer with accountant on that as well. Anyway, so some green infrastructure pictures. This is some pavers at our library on the right. On the left is near our farmers market. We have a bioswale, stormwater solutions bioswale. So we've done some very nice green infrastructure. It looks absolutely wonderful when it goes in. A few more pictures, some alleys, some narrow streets that we've done green infrastructure in the middle of them. So we have our water going in the middle of the alley. Some more. This is a picture in July. You can see the pretty flowers, the plants that are in there. It's operating very well. It's you know, I guess it's be about a year old, less than a year old. It's at SJ. Got it in here, looking good. So the green infrastructure is great. Green infrastructure is great at the beginning. There's a there's a message that came up there, but, okay. But it ages. There's a couple pictures here. You can see there's garbage, there's cups, McDonald's French fries. As you know, as with anything, it ages, and it's a challenge we all face. No one likes to see this. We all want to see the bright and shiny things. So, as I have my picture of Mr. Miyagi's car and the rusty gremlin, so some things are classic, some things are just old. So we are trying to keep things classic rather than getting them old. And the shiny new BMPs turned in quickly into rusty cars if we don't take care of them, especially in our weather. So in the city of West Allis, for our public, our green infrastructure, our BMPs, if it's public, our DPW maintains it. If it's on private property, then we have agreements with those private property owners to maintain theirs. I just got a call yesterday from our city forester because we're putting in another bioswale, and he says, I don't have the staff to maintain these. It's a major problem for us, and I'm sure it's a major problem for every other entity. When there are cuts, it's usually to the Department of Public Works. The MMSD Green Solutions money pays for new things, but not for maintenance. So it's an ongoing struggle. I kind of can explain, again, our city-owned green infrastructure. We don't have official recertification on that city-owned. We do vacuum our pavers and our porous asphalts. We pick up the garbage, weed the bioswales. We work, and I'm in the engineering department. We work very well with DPW to maintain these. Some ideas we've had is a private contract to maintain them. Partner with other cities, you know, say 2 or 3 cities could get together and hire one contractor to do a large maintenance contract. Those are some ideas. We have not done that yet. All we have done in West Allis so far is had our DPW maintain our green infrastructure. Our city-owned, I guess I'll call gray infrastructure. We do clean our catch basins on a rotating cycle. It's about every other year that they get vacuumed out, unless they're one that fills up quickly. We televise our problem storm lines. We inspect our culverts. We do a lot of street sweeping. So being a landlocked city, we have these are kind of the things that we do to maintain our stormwater quality. On a privately owned green infrastructure or BMP, they do, I guess we don't call it official recertification, but they do have an annual fee that they have to pay and an annual maintenance that they have to show the city that they have done. Each private BMP has an agreement that they sign when it goes in, when it gets built, and they get a letter from our code enforcement department, which was to be building inspection. And if they don't respond to that, if they don't pay their fee, building inspection has to go back to them, and it's kind of a lot of back and forth. But the code enforcement does inspect their private BMPs, and we can cite the owner eventually if those if those inspections and recertification process, if that does not get followed through on. This is an example. I know it's going to be hard to read, and I can send this to anyone that would like it. This was a maintenance schedule for a private BMP. I tried to take the name out, but it kind of goes through what needs to be done on a yearly basis. Again, following up with this, it's hard. We don't have one person that does this. It's kind of one person is not dedicated to doing this kind of thing. So it gets difficult to make sure every BMP follows this, but we do have an outline of what they're supposed to follow. So I guess, and we'll probably kind of get into this with the panel discussion of what do other cities, municipalities, counties do? Who does the maintenance work? Is private different than public? Are there fees involved? And that's something that we will get into with our panel discussion. With that, I believe the next slide was questions, but I think Carrie, we are going into just the panel, so.
So I think we heard both online and from all of you about how enforcement is a really difficult thing. Establishing who is the owner of the property has been an issue that showed up in questions online as well. I think Leif had a really great example of how do you transfer, because HOA is the question that everybody asks us, is like, how do we define who owns that HOA? And what if that name changes? What if that president's gone? Who's going to be paying those bills? And then they're left doing nothing. And what Sam had mentioned is like, well, the municipality is going to be responsible and they're going to need to come in and do something. Well, then who pays that bill? That's like all taxpayers that are paying that, right? Unless you can get some responsible party. So, I mean, I just feel like Leif, you're setting the great example of how to say for an outlot, make it fully an outlot, and everyone is 1/12 owner or whatever that is. So it wouldn't be a specific name that's assigned, right? As a part of the ownership of the outlot, it's one each address maybe, or how do you define that?
It says, it should say on the plat or CSM and on the maintenance agreement that, you know, if there are 12 lots, that every owner of lots 1 through 12 owns a 1/12 share individual, I forget the term, indivisible share of the outlot.
And then they have the deciding ruling to determine what needs to be done, what those costs are, and how they're going to distribute that.
Yeah, I think it's presumed that, yes, they'll get together in the form of an HOA to do whatever actions are needed. But once when I had too much time on my hands, I went to the state financial institution's website and got a list of every HOA in the state. And I went through, and 45% of them had gone, I forget what the term for it was, but essentially didn't exist anymore. So you can't count on those HOAs to exist. And the reason for putting all that stuff in the plat or in the maintenance agreement is so that, okay, if push comes to shove and the town or village has to, you know, come intervene, take action and do a special charge, the clerk just has to go to the plat and say, oh, I see, I'm going to assign 1/12 of the special charge to each of these lots.
And if one of the 12 defaults or somehow is bankrupt.
Well, it's a special charge, so it goes on their taxes.
Okay.
So essentially, the only way they could default would be by not paying their taxes.
And then the county will take their property if that comes to the case, right? Maybe. Sam,
That
you,
would go over well.
yeah,
I know, it's like knock on wood.
don't go there, right? Sam, you mentioned a number of things about, and Nick had asked a question about the potential non-compliance and what to do next. So what if you don't have compliance, like that same question? Do you give the municipality some ideas of maybe what other municipalities have done? Or I feel like they're all scratching their heads about like, well, we don't have our HOA set up like this right now. What do we do with that? What do we do with that church that had this bad BMP?
Yeah, when we talk with municipalities, like Rob and I were talking this morning, you know, we'll kind of, oh, this person or this municipality does this or that. But as far as do we have anything like written down, like here are recommendations or what to do when this is happening? Not yet. So it's something that as soon as I came out to DNR, like started seeing this BMP maintenance problem. So we've been like working on it. It's been kind of phases, right? Like, do you know who the property owner is? Like, do you have this agreement? Can you find this agreement? Is the agreement signed? Is it legal, right? Like there's all these different kind of issues to get here. But we have been looking at like the written program procedures. That's how we figured out that the permits needed a bit more like clarification in there. You know, who's got what are missing. We've been trying to connect municipalities together. If they say, well, we've got a problem with this, you know, my brain goes, oh, well, you know, this other municipality like had a similar problem, talk with them. But we are hopefully going to get some material, you know, together. And that would be part of our MS4 BMP menu, which I did not mention. We DNR created, so we get a lot of questions, right? What does this mean? What am I supposed to do? But you have examples of like written program procedures, right? So DNR has been putting together a lot of materials to help permittees comply with their permit. And then we put that on our MS4 BMP menu, which is found on our DNR website. So when we get a handle of like long-term maintenance issues and what to do and who to contact, that will eventually go on the MS4 BMP menu, but we're not there yet. No, and there's just with BMP inspection and maintenance, there's so many different like off-road challenges. It's not like everyone is starting from the same spot and then we can go here. Like we still have municipalities that either forgot to get the maintenance agreement or the maintenance agreement wasn't signed at the end, right? So now they go, well, how do I build a time machine and go back in time and get this, right? So we're it's not fun. There are some like strategies that folks are doing. But there's so many different issues at so many different stages that it's gonna be a big project.
I think Rob was sort of touching on like, what do other counties do? What do other cities do? How do we manage all of these things? I want to just pause on my questions to ask both online and in the audience. Do you guys have questions you want to, that are burning, you want to ask the panel? So I'm not going to just give them all of mine. And I'll repeat your question and you can target everybody or only one at a time. What up to you. And Carly, if some come in, maybe you could ask those.
Start with one that we have. For the panel, have you utilized routine chemical treatments for invasive plants such as cattails and fragmites and BMPs? And so how successful has it been?
So I think the question is, if the communities are using chemical treatments for any invasive plants and BMPs, and if that's been successful?
Mm-hmm.
Since the days of when we said Roundup was safe and everybody was good, and DNR used to tell us to go ahead and use Roundup even in your wetland areas because it's biodegradable in 7 days and we're all good. And now we find out that it's not. We're kind of like, don't use any chemicals at all. So we're struggling with that for sure. And I know there's some somewhat safer chemicals, but yeah, until next year and they decide those aren't. How is that working for you guys with the use of chemicals?
As far as I know, we don't use chemicals at all. There might be some spot applications. We do have a couple of basins that have native plants in them that are managed by our park staff who have certified applicators. And I think they may do some spot applications there, but no wholesale treatment. We've never tried to wipe out cattails. We don't have any Phragmites infestations that I'm aware of.
Lucky? Yeah, maybe, huh?
Yeah, as far, we may do some spot areas, but not a large scale.
Yeah, I haven't seen like a lot of chemical use.
Does DNR have their own owned BMPs on state lands that you have to maintain?
That's a good question. I don't know. Oh, well, yeah. So like the DNR, the new Milwaukee office building, we have a bioswale. Yeah, we've been doing kind of the routine maintenance, actually Pete Wood, which I'm sure most people know. He goes out there every single day. He's taking pictures of stuff. He's documenting things. He's picking up trash. So kind of little maintenance here and there we do.
This is included in Pete Wood's salary that he gets to be the
Yeah,
maintenance guy
It's
too.
it's one of his clubs. But yeah, we have the like contracts with maintenance crews. Who do some maintenance for us. Yeah.
Was there another question that came in from?
Does anyone require SWMS on individual lots? And if so, do they have maintenance agreements for it?
I am not familiar with the F. Somebody be able to tell me what that SW, stormwater management.
So what do you get?
Facilities on individual lots? Well, are the maintenance agreements recorded? And I think we heard from Leif that the agreements are recorded in so much detail. And I'll tell you, as a designer, we've had to submit some of those and I've been, why did they make us do all this? It really sucks to have to go through the process. But after the fact, it makes so much sense that that's recorded. It's at the county. You don't change owners and then, oh, I didn't know there was a stormwater something in my yard, right?
Oh, they'll say that anyways.
Yeah, but sorry, it's recorded. You should have had a better, process when you're purchasing property, I suppose, right? If the F word is a word that you can share.
It's facility.
Okay, facility.
They mean one lot with one
Lots of those. Yeah, I said every commercial entity, right? And sometimes larger. So we have some rules that if it's a 5-acre lot, you still have to do stormwater management, even if it's just a single family home. And then they would have that, right? But are those recorded in the
Yep.
county?
Yep.
It doesn't matter, right?
And easements and all that.
And probably in West Dallas, do you do any recording of the BMP requirements or the maintenance agreements or?
If it's public, we have, it's,
Yeah,
recorded, but if it's private, it's just I guess I don't think it's recorded like with the county. It's just.
And I would say outside of, so in southeast Wisconsin, that's where my experience is in. Waukesha County does, an excellent job of recording all that information. It doesn't really happen anywhere else. And so like these long-term maintenance agreements exist, but sometimes they're lost, right? So the conversation is like, well, I know that I have it, but I can't find it. Like, give me a couple of weeks to look through boxes in the basement, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, it would be great if they were recorded, but again, that's not like a DNR like requirement. The policy is you have to have it, but as far as it being recorded with the county, it's obviously a really good idea, but it's something that we can't at this point in time anyway require.
so when everybody's been plagiarizing, because that's the word you use, we would say sharing your documents.
Yeah.
I think there's good reason for that, and maybe you don't mind making it available for everybody, or do you want to charge a fee?
It's on our website.
Yeah,
So you can
okay.
get it down.
Yeah, good. So on
It's on
your,
our website too now.
so on some of the, everyone, somebody asked a question about whether or not you'd be able to get these slides. All of the sessions are being recorded, so you'd be able to see the presentation via the recorded session, and then everybody's email addresses, and their, company or, agency, website should be on their presentation. Possibly we could make that additional information available too if somebody wanted that. Any other questions in the group here? We have about 10 minutes for questions, and I still have many, so, don't be shy, but yeah, please.
Rod, you alluded to this. So there are at least 3 departments involved in this. It sounds like engineering, DPW, building inspection.
Yeah.
Is there a formal way that you track this, some sort of asset management, or do you just, is it informal? Who is ultimately responsible for making sure it gets done?
Let me repeat that real quick.
Yeah, so he asked if we have 3 different departments that kind of are involved in these, and is there a formal process for sharing who did what and tracking it? That's one of our struggles. Our DPW maintains the public, the ones on public property. I don't see a formal, when it was done. I could ask them, and I believe they are tracking when they do these maintenance procedures. And our building inspection is responsible for the private ones. And again, there's not a shared document, but I could follow up with them and see when the inspections were done. So that's kind of
It's a phone call method rather
yeah,
than
yeah, so
asset management, right?
right. And I'd love to have it on a click or on a GIS thing where you can click on a BMP and see when it was last inspected. Right now, we don't have that.
Any online questions you want to grab?
How would you handle if the plat says the HOA is responsible for maintenance, not the property lot owners, but then now the HOA is no longer existing?
So how would you handle if the HOA is no longer in existence and they were the responsible party and now they're dissolved?
On an outlot?
Yeah. See, Waukesha County doesn't know how to answer that because they never had that problem. But everybody else does in the world, right? So how do we go back in time again?
I don't, that sounds like a situation where essentially if the municipality intervenes, I don't think they have a way to collect then other than taxing the outlot. But if the outlot's owned by something that no longer exists, then it's going to be a tax default, which means that we'll wind up owning it. So.
Yeah. And Rob, do you have any outlets that are?
No, ours are either, a private business with one.
Mhm.
We don't have one like in a neighborhood or something.
Have you seen this, Sam?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the long-term maintenance agreement was with the HOA dissolved. BMP needs to be inspected and maintained, and nobody knows what to do because they don't know who to talk to, right? the end of the day, DNR wants the BMP maintained. So we have difficult conversations about, well, like we hope, that there's an avenue to recoup cost. But I don't know, right? Like I come from the DNR policy perspective, I don't have a legal degree. So we can say, well, the BMP needs to be maintained. But yeah, it sounds like a lot of times it's just gonna come at the cost of the municipality, and how they recoup those costs, I don't know.
It comes out of some general fund or a maintenance, maybe a utility fee or something like that, yeah.
If they're taking credit for it as an MS4 compliance
Right,
thing, then they just kind of have to do it, unfortunately. But most municipalities have utilities districts, so they at least have some way to fund that.
right. Yeah, that's a really good point. We didn't even really touch on that, I don't think, so far, so I want to just jump in on that one. A lot of permits are requiring some kind of water quality modeling to be done, determining whether or not, especially if you're in TMDL area, if you're compliant, and you're likely not, and so how are you going to get there? And so a lot of our approaches have been to look at what BMPs currently exist, model them as though they're functioning well, excuse me, and then take credit for that, even if it's on private property, and then move to what happens next, like where are we still not compliant, we'll have to propose some BMPs for the future in various, watersheds. So if we're modeling them as though they're really functioning, we're taking a lot of credit for something, and then we go in the field and we're like, the thing isn't even there anymore, or this was a wet pond and it's all silted in and now it looks sort of like a constructed wetland, but really it's just a filled in wet pond. You really should not be able to get credit for that, right? And is there any back checking, I suppose, from DNR's perspective that yes, this thing actually is functioning and you do get credit?
Yes and no. So we're expecting that permittees are giving us information that's correct, right? Like you're signing everything that says that this is how many inspections we've done, this is what our modeling is. We've caught it, a couple times where, the modeling is submitted and then they're like, well, for our, commitment of action, how we're gonna demonstrate more progress, we're gonna fix this one BMP. And I go, well, wait a second, because you just modeled it like it was like functioning as designed, so what's going on? And then we've had conversations of, well, you need to redo your modeling to more accurately reflect what's going on. The other important piece with the modeling municipally operated BMPs, so those are the private BMPs that you have a maintenance agreement with. If you're going to model a private BMP, you have to have a legal long-term maintenance agreement. If you don't have it, you can't find it, it's not signed, you can't include it. Because the idea is if the municipality cannot ensure that BMP is being inspected and maintained, it can't take credit for it.
So then you would want to just go take ownership of it and then be able to take the credit for the water quality it's providing you, rather than starting over and buying a new section of land and then building your own new BMP. So that would make sense, I suppose. Yeah, in the group here in person, anybody have a question? A whole bunch online. You want to pick a couple of hot ones? Oh, I'm sorry, Anuja.
Those are years where people totally forget about.
So is there education that's provided by any of the agencies to property owners or the maintenance people even responsible for the maintenance on these? Because maybe they have no idea what a bioswale is and how it should function, correct?
He does HOA workshops targeted HOAs to inform them about their BMPs and how they're supposed to be maintained.
Are you just the golden child on every answer here?
My longtime supervisor was very forward thinking.
Yeah. That's the best answer, but I've never heard that one before in all my years, so that's awesome.
I wouldn't say it's common, but we're seeing it more and more. The getting a private BMP owner to do the inspections and to do the maintenance and to really understand the importance of the BMP has been missing, right? I have a good example of an unnamed municipality who didn't do maintenance on a BMP for a long time. And so it had a bunch of trees in it and turtles and migrating birds and stuff. So when they came to clean out this pond, the residents were really upset, right? They're like, that you're destroying nature, like, what can you do? I got dragged through the mud on it. It was fantastic. So we've been seeing more and more like education, so sending out, letters to the private BMP owners that say, hey, did you know you have a BMP? Do you know what it is? Do you know why it's important? Why don't you come to this workshop? And then some education is provided there. And I can't say that it's always successful, but especially like Waukesha County, there's been a couple examples where it's been really successful to get that like buy-in, right? So then they're now getting inspection reports back, they're getting that maintenance done. So, and yeah, education is always gonna be key. I also read like permit conditions to kind of like encourage stuff like that and then give, kind of credit for stuff like that. We've been talking about like measurable goals or like training requirements. Yeah, if there is some kind of education that will help you do your job, like to help you comply with the permit, do it. If it's educating elected officials, if it's educating private people, owners, like go forth, do it. I'll give you credit with your permit. Let's go.
Great. There's a really odd question, Rob, for you that I caught the same thing that someone else online thought they heard, and I hope we heard it wrong, that you're going to try to encourage no native species because they're hard to maintain? Or was
No,
it
maybe
no
it's-
non-native?
No, I don't. If I said it, it's not.
That's not what you meant. Okay.
I said that.
Oh, you said that,
I
yeah.
mean, our policy
I'm
is
sorry,
that
Rob.
for infiltration practices, we want native plants.
Okay. So what we thought we heard was we don't want, or we want non-native or something like that. So,
No, it's,
We're
I was
hoping it was
talking
that.
about the context of, like, we have our retention basins and Silver Spring Road, there's like 15 of them. And they're all planted with native plants. And our Public Works Department has, and it's a highly visible location where everybody driving up and down Silver Spring sees those basins, whether they really notice it or not. Well, they're really weedy. They grow, that sandy soil just loves to grow thistle. Our Public Works Department, and I actually had a picture of them in my presentation of them doing some mowing using like a tractor with a 3-gang mower with the one arm of it, down in the basin, mowing skin slopes, and the Public Works guys just hate those basins because, the side slopes, they can mow with, they don't want to do anything that you can't maintain inside a piece of power equipment.
yeah.
And the bottoms of those basins, the only way to really mow them is with a weed whacker. Well, they just hate weed whackers. Maybe you've had a different experience.
No, I was gonna say, on the maintenance, so for the private BMPs, we do have, and I can share this, a checklist, basically, that goes through the devices who, test basins that they have to be inspected after heavy rains and when they need to be vacuumed out and that kind of thing. So we do have a written procedure, but who is doing it, that part is, a training thing is difficult. But yes,
we love native plants. It's just with so many BMPs, we have to do stuff that can be done using machines and efficiently. Native plants and efficiency don't go hand in hand,
Right.
unfortunately.
Well, that's really all the time we have for this section.